Welcome to Teaching Adults 2014 GED. Woo! What we're all here to talk about, right? I look forward to getting to know you. You should know I'm Megan. Hi. See my picture there? Obviously, I'm right here, too. I post all my PowerPoints online. This is actually Cleveland. People ask me all the time. It's a church in Cleveland, but the sky is photoshopped. Sky in Cleveland does not look like that. I am a GED instructor, like many of you, and wrote a book by the name of the session today, Teaching Adults, 2014 GED Resource book for New Readers Press. I'm going to start by answering a couple questions I always get, just so you're not wondering the whole session. Number one, I am older than I look, or I look younger than I am, however you want to think about that. And people ask all the time, how did you come to write this book? I've been a GED instructor for my whole career, and then in 2008 I started helping out in the recession, started helping out programs with grant writing, training their volunteers, how to run their programs, keep things running for less, basically. And that went so well that then we decided to apply for some collaborative grants. We started an AmeriCorps program, we developed some literacy resources, and I've been involved with ProLiteracy the whole time. So eventually, New Readers Press, I don't know how they found out about me, but they said, hey, we've read some of the stuff you've done, we like it, would you like to write this book for us? So that is how that happened. Yay. But what you should know is they approached me and not, say, an official expert somewhere with, because what they want is the instructional perspective on the GED. So that's really what we're going to talk about today, is what does this mean in the classroom from the instructor's perspective with the new GED test. And the other thing I should warn you is that I am an independent consultant, so I work with all different sorts of organizations in Cleveland and have now been doing these conference sessions with the book. So when I say I like something, it's because I genuinely like it. So just to warn you, I like a lot of things, and some people think I'm a little crazy because I'm positive about it. But just to warn you ahead of time, I don't work for GED Testing Service. And other than the book, I love New Readers Press. But I love everybody. There's a lot of love. So, so you'll get a lot of love in this session. So this is what we are going to talk about today. And again, this is what we are going to talk about today. I'm not here to talk at you. But we're going to discuss what can we expect in 2014. We're going to talk about what those implications are for adult literacy instruction and curricula. I'm going to walk you through a lesson from the book called Up in Arms Over the Second Amendment, and you have your handout with you already. And then the second half of the session is going to be this. I'm going to give you a chance to talk to each other about using some of the principles from the book to create an interdisciplinary lesson plan. And so you can have the time to really process, what would this look like in my program for me as an instructor or for my instructors as I'm bringing this professional development to them, okay? The other thing you should know, I post all my stuff online. So if you go back to farrellinc.com, you'll find these PowerPoints, you'll find the handouts, you'll find links to the sampler at New Readers Press. All this is available, all this is free. If you want to take it back and use this exact same thing with your folks at your programs, they were saying train the trainer earlier. This is train the trainer. Take it back, use it, please. All right, so what can we expect? How many of you have already been to sessions, webinars, conference sessions about the 2014 test? Raise them high. How many have? Okay. How many have not? Okay, great. That's good. Actually, so this is not going to be a repeat for everybody. There was one session I went to last week in Ohio where they know me, and I said, how many people have been to a webinar? Everybody raised their hand. I was like, okay. So it's good that we have a mix because we're going to do a little quiz here. I summarized for you what I think what I did as an instructor is what I'm sure each and every one of you would love to do, which is spend 7 months reading everything that the GED Testing Service has published for the past 5 years. I'm sure that's exactly what you want to do and have time to do in your program. And so having read all of that, I summarized what I think are the top 5 biggest changes that everybody should know about. Okay? Common Core State Standards, depth of knowledge, 100% computer-based testing, new test pricing, and 4 intertwined subjects. What I will point out is that 4 of these are the same changes regardless of which high school equivalency test you're going to end up with in 2014. You go with task, these things are still going to be the same. You go with high set, these things are going to be the same. So even though it says GED on it today, you know, even if I know every state is different and, you know, we just heard about Tennessee's going to have alternative, all these things can apply to all of them. Okay, so we have a little quiz. Don't say it out loud now. You have your pencil or your pen. You got your paper. I want you to take a minute if you've done these webinars and everything. See if you know the answers to these. I know, I haven't even started yet. I haven't told you anything and I'm giving you a quiz. These are for the people who have done this already. Okay? What's the motto of the Common Core State Standards? What percentage of things are connected to the different depth of knowledge level? And for GED math test, what percent of people have passed paper-based the first time versus computer-based the first time? Take a guess, even if you haven't even heard it. Okay? All right, second questions. What's going to be the price of the new test? Does everybody know this? Again, we'll hear it as we go up. We know this? 400. No. What depends on where you are. Hold on. All right, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. All right. Who sets the price for test takers? And how long are the writing sections going to be for reasoning, language arts, social studies, and science? Does anybody know all the answers to these yet? Okay, good. This information is going to be interesting to you. That's good. All right, who knows about the Common Core State Standards? Have at least heard about it? Yeah, everybody feels like you know that, right? So who knows the motto? Who wants to share that with us? Anybody know? Oh, man. All right, so we know that Common Core State Standards are going to be the basis for the assessment targets on the GED test, right? That's where they're pulling it from. It's also going to be the basis for standards-based instruction. So you see that keyword. The Common Core State Standards are the basis for that. Common Core State Standards are, as you may know, also going to be the basis for K-12 instruction and assessment. So that means that we are, for the first time, hooray, going to be aligned with K-12 instead of, at least in the state of Ohio, having a completely different set of standards. So it's just reading language art, or English language arts and math. It's not science and social studies. Fewer, clearer, higher. All right, that's the motto. So the goal was, don't have all these confusing different things. Fewer, clearer, higher. The higher is what we're worried about, though, right? Yes. All right, depth of knowledge. Who knows? We have 4 depth of knowledge levels. You can see I crossed one out. We don't have to worry about that one. So anybody know what percentage is at that 1% or that level 1, just basic recall?
Is it
20%, hooray! Let's give them a round of applause. Come on. Let me out here, come on. Yay! Yeah, pat yourself on the back. All right, how about levels 2 and 3? They clump those together. What percent is, what percent, we have 20 up here. I crossed out 4, so that gives you a good clue. This is a math, 80%, good. This is becoming a math lesson. We got 80% at this levels 2 and 3, okay? It is different than Bloom's taxonomy that we're comfortable with, but it's not that different. You know, we've got synthesis, we've got inference, we've got main points and identify relationship. It's just how do we talk about those things that we actually do. So only a little bit is going to be at recall. Most of it is going to be at this identifying and then synthesis. But we don't have to worry about this, okay? Computer-based testing. Now this is interesting, I think. So they started computer-based testing. Who has had students already go through computer-based testing? Only 3. Okay. So not everybody's implemented all the different states. So they've had, with the 2002 test series, they've already had, nationwide at least, about 30,000 people go through computer-based testing. And we know that they're with Pearson VUE now instead of STECBON. And one of the interesting things that's going to come up is in 2014, instead of having to wait, and again this is Ohio, we have to wait about a week to get the scores back, they're going to have automated scoring, which means we'll get test results back in 3 hours. So it's pretty exciting for our students.
Our students get it as soon as they walk out. It's 3 days for writing.
But you do with the computer-based,
We
even
don't
with
have
the
an
current
option.
computer.
I wish we got an option.
Because
Who
you're
rules
in
that? Does anybody in here know?
who decides.
Who did Pearson VUE have to go up and bid for the job to get the testing rights, or
I don't
they
know.
have a monopoly on it?
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
do.
and they charge $160 for the whole test.
In Georgia right
In
now.
Georgia,
Right now.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing about it, students are immediately get their test scores
That is good.
and also writing scores within 5 days in an email. So no more of that long waiting. So it has
the long way.
its advantages.
Right, it does have its
They
advantages.
pay for it.
They have to know how to
Right.
use the test though. Right? That's what we're all worried about. I see a lot of nodding heads. And you know what? One of the things I'm really interested in technology. Not that I use all the technology, but I'm very interested in it. You know, I want to know what's going on. I don't want to use it all. And I know maybe some of you are in that boat too. So one of the things that I'm interested in is usability. Like if I can figure something out right away, I'll use it. If I can't, I won't. Right? Are you like that too?
Yeah, exactly.
So, so the GED testing service knew this. They knew we would be worried about computer-based testing. They heard us saying, what? Our students don't know how to use the computer. They need to know how to use it. So they did something with computer-based testing they never did with paper-based testing. And quite honestly, they probably should have. They did a usability study, which means all these tens of thousands of people they have doing the field testing, they sat them down, a section of them, and just said, how can we, this is again with the 2002 series, okay, not even with 2014. They took the test, put it on the computer, sat the students in front and said, how do you use it? Is this easy to use? Is this hard to use? Why? And the students, or potential test takers, I should say, is how GED Testing Service thinks of it, they found 500 problems with the test, 500, with just taking the paper-based test and sticking the same exact thing on the computer, which means that probably most of those were also a problem with the paper-based test. And so they made those 500 changes to the test when they built it on the computer. As a result, now the people who are going through the test are getting increased scores. They're finishing faster than they did on paper, and they were reporting that their stress is actually reduced. And this is, and they put people in front of the computer who are even like, all I know how to do is click a mouse, right? Which are most of our students, right? And maybe they know how to, maybe all they know is how to, use their thumbs. And then we had this passing rate. When I saw this, I went back to some of my students who have been taking math over and over and over again for years. And I said, you know what? We might want to try putting you on the computer. Because 30% passing on paper and 83% on the computer, with 30,000 people having taken the test, I was shocked. And I see there's some mouths open. I'm not the only one, right? And the overall passing rate also increases. And this is with no change in the actual content. So that's just a lesson for you too, not only with the GED test, but as you're looking at other computer-based educational things. Usability. If you write down that word, usability. Just when you sit your students in front of it, how easy is it for them to pick up? Is going to make a huge difference in how they actually perform. All right, who knows the new price? I heard 400. In some places it's 125, 40 in Alabama, 65. I'm hearing all over the place. What?
Depends on the state, doesn't it?
Depends on the state. So the wholesale price, the price it costs to actually administer it nationwide, is $120. Now, I actually just found out the other day, this price is not actually new. Right now, it costs $120 a test to administer the GED test. I did not know that. But the jurisdictions may set the student fee higher and lower, anywhere from $400 all the way down to nothing, like in the state of New York. Okay, right. Don't we all wish we lived in New York? It's 140 now. Okay, but there is somewhere, and I don't know where, but there is somewhere that has a 400. I've seen that. Yeah. You're not crazy. No, I've seen that number too. Yeah, I have seen that $400 number too. Somewhere it is $400. Now the lesson out of this is who sets the real prices? Who is it? The state. So if you are upset about the prices, who should you talk to? Your state. Go to your state. Talk to them about it. We're having this conversation in Ohio. Everybody's writing letters to the editor and this, that, and calling their representatives. Talk to your state. Now, the value for the GED test, though, we know this stuff too, right? We know that this changes people's lives. It makes $250,000 at least, minimum, over the course of their lives. Increased earnings. And one of the interesting things about GED Testing Service partnering with Pearson VUE now, that people are like, oh, they got the monopoly, right? I know that. So, and I'm with you on that, but I'm going to give, again, I'm a positive person. I'm not an optimist, but I'm just decided to find what I like about it. Is I found 3 things that I think make this a good thing. One is they've shut down 40 fraudulent companies, sued them for using the GED test name to scam our students and steal their money.
Yes.
I think that's a good thing.
$300 for a test that wasn't even
Right.
legit.
Not even legit. They've shut down 40 of them. I think that's a good thing. They've created some really fun YouTube videos. Have any of you seen these GED pep talks? Have you seen them? If you haven't seen them, if you like YouTube, go to YouTube and look up GED Testing Service. They have some really like B-level celebrities, and they have GED pep talks anywhere from your like gentle, encouraging, all the way up to like get up in your face, talking to GED. They're hilarious. And I'm not doing him any justice. And then they've always researched what's the value of the GED test, but now that they have some competition, they're really going to be stepping this up. I think they're going to be stepping up this research about what is the benefit actually to people who take the test. You know. All right. Any other questions, by the way, on the value or the price? Yeah.
Well, not value or price. Just have a question.
Yes.
I just learned the other day that McGraw-Hill is going to administer the TASC.
Test. Yeah. Or
TASC.
TASC. Yeah.
TASC.
Yes.
So are they going to be in competition with Pearson VUE?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just talked to them last week. They said they're not putting out any materials that say GED test on them because they
Pearson.
McGraw-Hill is not putting out anything that says GED on it because they have the competing assessment now.
So the state will decide if they will use Pearson VUE or if they will use the TASC.
Yeah, the TASC, and then there's also HiSET, which is Educational Testing Service. They're the people that do the SAT. That's the one that just passed in Tennessee. Now, to make it more complicated, if you noticed, when they said in Tennessee what they had to do, they actually had to pass legislation to allow for the use of the ETS test. The same is true in Ohio. In Ohio, our legislation says GED test. So if they were to allow, I mean, it's kind of an interesting public-private thing, right? Because this is, you know, they're saying, the state of Ohio has said they will only accept the GED test. So we can't accept HiSET, we can't accept TASC, unless they actually change the legislation. In New York, they have accepted the test. Yeah, so that's something that legislatures are looking at as they're looking at the price, and a big part of it is the price. TASC is going to be $75, I've heard, instead of $120. Yeah.
If they do not take the one that is the GED test,
Yes.
they take another one,
Yes.
are the diplomas that they get
The same.
equally recognized?
Yeah. I'm going to go back.
So it's really just the cost that's different.
It's pretty much the cost and the delivery method. Task and HiSET are going to continue to have paper-based testing for a while to ease people into it. GED Testing Service has already been doing computer-based testing. They said, we like it, we're just gonna go 100% in 2014. The Common Core state standards are still going to be the basis of all of the high school equivalency assessments. So what McGraw-Hill is doing is they're coming out with a series of adult ed products that say Common Core, this, that, and the other thing, instead of GED. And they'll be for the task, they'll be for the HiSET, they'll be, but I mean, honestly, I think the materials that are gonna come out of this, like, if you buy my book, that doesn't mean you can't prepare people for the task, just cause mine says GED on it. It's still gonna be pretty much the same.
So the contest is saying the cost and delivery method are different.
Cost and delivery are gonna be different. And it might be different types of test items too. I mean, they're not gonna be exactly the same, and we don't have the details yet, really, on HiSET and on task to know. And one of the things that maybe I shouldn't have heard, but I did overhear in the national test was somebody from McGraw-Hill saying, you know, we don't really expect GED Testing Service to share all of their field testing data and those sort of things with us. So, you know, it's gonna be hard to know if they're comparable or not. So they're using the Common Core, you know, and they didn't say that on a knock on themselves, just saying like, you know, we think it's gonna be the same. We're gonna use the same standards, we're gonna use the same methods to, you know, have people take it, to do the norming, you know, have however many people take it. They have high school seniors take it to see how they would compare those sort of things. And that's how they decide the passing levels. Those processes are gonna be the same for either test.
Will there still be official practice test involved with this? And
Yes.
will they be delivered the same way?
Yes, it will be, they'll actually be out, I've heard in September or October of this year, the practice test for 2014.
So it's still gonna be required for all tests, regardless of which one it is, the practice.
So, yeah, both the GED and the ETS, they would all still be official practice tests, or do you know?
No, they would be, you would then have your official GED practice test, your official task practice test, your official
Okay.
HiSET practice test. The official practice tests are gonna still be associated with one particular
Okay.
test that they're ultimately taking, yeah.
And do we know if states are starting to do the same thing as they do now, as to have a certain level that has to be authorized, a notarized statement, in order to go in and take the actual test?
That actually varies state by state.
I know, yeah, but.
Yeah, so I don't know that. I don't know. That is a good question though to ask your state officials, how those changes are gonna be. One of the other big changes, the 4 intertwined subjects. So right now a lot of folks are organizing, and as well they should, you know, five classes for 5 different subjects, or maybe they combine science and social studies, or, you know, so reading and writing have been combined into reasoning through language arts, science, social studies, and you'll notice they added this word reasoning, right? And they did that on purpose, because what they really want to emphasize here, and what the Common Core state standards really emphasize, is you take real world problems, the content from science and social studies, right? You take your health things and you take your civics things, and then you use those as the basis for your reasoning problems. And people are just reasoning using the language arts, or reasoning through the math. And then for writing though, writing's not just its own test anymore. You're gonna have 45-minute, this is your answer to your question earlier, 45-minute extended response in reasoning through language arts, 25-minute extended response in social studies, and 2 short, should be about 10 minutes or under, for science.
What's the percentage for the science?
What percent is science?
Minutes.
Minutes. It's 2 that are 10 minutes or under. So the ones that are 10 minutes or other are not actually going to be timed separately. In reasoning through language arts and social studies, they're actually going to be a separate time, like you do the rest of the multiple choice questions and then you sit down and you do your writing. In science, it's just going to be stuck in there. You know, you have 90 minutes, I think, total for science. You'll have 2 of these short responses. So these extended responses are going to be based on passages. You know, right now you have a couple sentences. Tell us a goal that you have in the next 5 years, right? That's one I've had students have a lot. Now, and then they have to just pull all of the content from that out of their head. They have to figure out, what am I going to talk about, and then construct, you know, when we tell them use the 5-paragraph essay, yada yada. All right, so the passages are going to be anywhere from 250 words to, in this one, like 950 words. They read the passages, and then they have to construct an answer. They give a question based on the passage. So, like, what kind of, and then they have to make an argument using information from the passage. So they're expected to actually refer back to the information that they read instead of having to pull everything out of their heads. So plus minus, right? All right, one last thing, and then I'm going to let you, because I know people are raring to go to talk about this. Yeah?
Generally speaking, what level of, you know, would be able to actually begin to pass this? I know they used to say around 9th or 10th. What are we shooting for this one?
Well, here's the tricky part. It's still going to be 9th or 10th grade level, but it's going to be 9th or 10th grade K-12 level based on the Common Core state standards. So for reading, for example, the texts that are going to be considered 9th and 10th grade level texts are going to be a little harder than what they are now.
Our students never went through that Common Core. So
Right.
they were out of
Right, exactly. So now, so they are comparing it though. They're comparing it to high school students now, and then that's how they're going to set the passing level. So again, you know, how high the passing level is, I don't know. It's hard to say what that's going to be.
So that hasn't been completed yet, because the old one was
Right.
60%, I think, is what they used to be on the 2000.
Yeah, I'm not.
So we don't know this one.
We don't know this one. They don't even know
I
this
can
one.
take you some schools, none of them could pass, but anyway, that's.
Right. Well, yeah. Now we have to think about how difficult the reading is, and we also have to think about how difficult the math is, because they're also going to be interpreting data, so they're going to have graphs and charts, and we already do this now, right, in science and social studies. So that's going to continue to be the same. All right. Other questions that people have? Well, I'm going to give you a chance to process it a little bit with each other, and then we'll come around and talk about it. So, implications for the instruction and curricula. I don't know. Right? You know what the implications are for you. So I want you to take 5 minutes, find a partner or 3 people at your table, and talk about this. How is this going to affect you? How is this going to affect your students? How is this going to affect your program? Okay. We're going to all come back together. And again, I promise you're going to have some more time to talk a little later. But I just want to bring us back together so you can share a little bit with the group. What were some of the things you discussed? And we can start with, what are the effects on you? What's an effect? Actually, I should bring you a microphone. Hold on.
And I'm from Texas. It's a big state, but I'm from Texas. Well, one of the effects on me, one of the things I do, and I teach adult ed, most of the students trying to get ready for the GED. They spend about a third of their time in my classroom working independently at their level, but we spend 2/3 of our time working together. And one of the things I do with students who are more advanced and with students who are lower level, I will put up with a projector system questions in the GED format. So whatever skill it is we're going over, whether it's algebra or geometry or commas with compound and complex sentences, all of the different skills, I give them all practice, even my lower level students, in the GED format, the type of question. They have to have the skills first before they can practice taking the GED, but when we're working together, we can be practicing questions in the GED format. And so, when it's on the computer, that's going to be a little trickier for me to do. I'm very accustomed to, okay, here's some here's a reading passage. Let's read through this together. Now let's answer these half a dozen questions. And they'll go around the room and they'll show me with their fingers if they choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I've become very accustomed to focusing on different skills in that format. And I'm wondering, how am I going to do that in the future?
Good question. Very good question. Anybody want to answer her? Thoughts you've had? Yeah.
A system, I'm a middle school retired teacher, and a system that we used is a little, you know what I'm talking about, and I can't think of the name of it. It's a little clicker thing, and you click it, and you have a board, and it shows the answers that they have. Or you can use And that, what was the name of that? I can't remember.
I don't know.
had a
I mean,
It had a cute little name, but they have a little clicker, and then it shows it, and then it shows it up on a board, so you can actually see it.
okay. Yeah, you can put it up on a board. I mean, so what I could do, for example, is I can take off this PowerPoint, right? Instead of using my PowerPoint, I can escape from here. Goodbye, PowerPoint. Right? And I can just pull up my, I do this sometimes with my students. I just pull up the internet and show them things on the internet or the clicker thing. Something that they did actually in the COABE National Conference. I'm not going to actually show you the internet. That would be way too distracting for right now. Is they had a Twitter feed going. So if for the folks who are on Twitter, they were showing people how to use Twitter. People were signing up there in the session, and they had like a little hashtag that they've used. Who here is on Twitter, by the way? I know you are. All right. We got it. So you can also do this with text messaging. You can do this with several different kinds of programs where you get a hashtag or a word that they use to kind of show that they're in the program, and then you can show that feed, so every time they can be asking questions, just typing with their fingers, even with their own phones that they have with them. Or text, send text, and you can pop it right up on the screen. All right, other impacts on you. If I hide the mic, will you talk more? You don't have to talk to the mic, seriously. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
My name is Linda Nelson. I'm a director of Literacy Council in Arkansas. And I think the implication or the effect it's going to have on us or my people as instructors is to try to raise the levels of understanding to meet this new criteria or the Common Core for the GED. That's the effect.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah, might take a little longer, honestly. Yep.
I'm relatively new to this arena. My name is Adrian, and I'm a program coordinator for the Literacy Council of Central Alabama. And we really normally are servicing other literacy agencies, not really providing GED testing or anything of that sort. But because we advertise, a lot of people come to us first to find out where they need to go to get their GEDs. And when we talk to them, just in some kind of pre-assessment, we can often gauge that they don't even need to try right now. They need to come to us first. So for this, I see us really having more equipment needs, because as this thing becomes more computerized, and we normally haven't had a lot of, we have some laptops, but we don't have many because that's just not a necessary focus for us right now. But I think that it's going to become necessary, because if they're going to have to practice that with us before they can even get to someone who is really training them for a GED, and we don't have that equipment right now. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah, so even pre-GED, right? Using that technology. Good. Other thoughts, impacts, maybe on your students that you think, yep.
So one thing I've been worried about is making the transition from the old test to the new test, and how that's going to affect the students. For example, right now they take the test, and then if they don't pass, they have, I think, 30 days. After 30 days, they can retake it. So when do you cut off this test? Because the test won't carry over, correct?
Right.
So when do you make that transition?
Yeah.
From one test to the next?
When you start training people for it.
Well, not even training people, but when do you tell them, don't take this test anymore, because if you don't pass something, then you can't carry your scores over?
Sure. Well, that one's an easy one. December 31st, 2013. That one I know. But when do they, right, in Ohio, the Ohio Department of Education is the one that delivers the GED test. They have given a firm deadline of, I think it's like August 8th, where you had to sign up for the test by that date if you're even going to take it by the end of the year. So again, I would send it back to whoever it is in your state administers the GED test, they may have either a recommended or a firm deadline that they have by which you should sign up. But I would say end of the summer, really, just with how many people are going to be signing up. You know, we already have a 3-month waiting list between when you sign up and when you take the test. I think 4 now. Yeah.
Where's that?
What, 3 months waiting list?
In Ohio, well, it used to be that in Ohio. I don't even know what it is now because.
People are really feeling rushed to just go ahead and set up times and, yeah.
Right, yeah. One of the things we have going on is I have programs who have started signing people up to take the test even though they know they're not ready yet. They haven't passed the practice. Right, yeah. What's another effect on your students?
No, not students,
Program. Go ahead, programs. Let's move on to programs.
Well, I think one of the effects on the program is it's going to cost us a lot more to train the teachers, to get new materials, to find out how to teach the students better, and usually these programs are not well funded to begin with. Right. Right. So we're increasing the cost of delivering the program without even increasing the quality of the program, and just to maintain, just to get the new materials, to train the teachers. Absolutely, it's a big one. You have it.
I'm Patricia Hatchett from Athens, Alabama Learn to Read Council, and we are a nonprofit who primarily focuses on reading literacy for adults. Now we have a local junior college, and when a GED student goes there to be tested for their reading level, and if they are not at that reading level, they are referred to us, and we try to get them up to the reading level to begin the GED study. Now, with this change, will that reading level that's required be higher?
Yes.
So we may be getting more students.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely, yes.
That'll be a big effect.
That is a big effect, absolutely.
And I've worked along with her, and we mostly work with low-income families that really can't even afford the GED at the price it's at now.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an issue.
Yeah. We had, in Ohio, we used to have a waiver where people used to, if they passed the practice test, then the state would pay for them to take the test. And then in the recession, they decided to cut that and just, it used to be $65 if you paid separate. And what they did was they lowered the price to $40, but everybody had to pay. And I work with a group of programs that we said our students still can't pay $40, so we created a GED Scholarship. We got together as a group, and we had 6 of us go together, 7 I think now, and apply to a family foundation to get money to cover it. And now that same foundation is having to look at, are we going to pay 3 times more for one test? You know, it's hard, but I think they are going to do that. But
we have a scholarship foundation. I mean,
yes.
we set some funds aside too. We had a lump sum that we were given at one point, and we just, if the students demonstrated enough interest to come and have some minimal, keeps coming back, a certain period of time, we might allow them to apply for those funds. Yes. And we put certain restraints on the funds, but we would let them apply.
Yeah.
And it was only like $50 or something like that, but they didn't have anything, so it helped them to be able to take it.
Right, it made the difference. Absolutely. Cool. All right, so now we're depressed. I'm going to share with you just my 2 cents of having looked through the same thing. I'm looking at the same reality you're looking at, right? But my approach, I guess, to how things are going to be with the GED test, and specifically when it comes to instruction, is, my big metaphor is that the GED test is like a marathon. I've always said that, right? Most people can't wake up in the morning and pass a marathon. It's the same with the GED test. And now it's kind of like the GED test is moving from 26.2 to 28-mile marathon. It's getting longer. But that means that we have to sustain people's attention longer. And so we've also been looking at a lot of the research on how do we keep people coming longer, how do we retain them. And the metaphor I have for this is, you know, if you divide it into, we're going to do reading today, we're going to do math tomorrow, et cetera, it's kind of like if you're preparing for the marathon by running on the treadmill day after day. My husband's that kind of guy. He's a runner, he runs on the treadmill, he goes outside, he can go do that for half an hour, I'm bored out of my mind. So for me, I like to go with a group. I like to work with a team and do different things, have a little bit of variety, do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So that's kind of what we did, at least with this book. And we do also have the GED Score Boost series that does divide it into single subject instruction. So I'm not saying single subject instruction is wrong by any means. But just that's how I am, that's how I teach. And that's how I think the new GED is challenging us to try those kind of methods. And the other thing that we decided to do with the book was, you know, I'm in Cleveland. I have my very specific students here in Alabama and Tennessee and Indiana and all over the place, Texas. We have low-level students. We have corrections. We're all over the place, right, when it comes to adult literacy. So how do I write something that's going to be engaging content for my students and your students and your students? I put my hands up and I said, I'm not going to do it. So what the book has in it, it's a lot of strategies, but you can add whatever content it is that you choose. And coming back to your question about buying new materials, again, I'm just going to throw this out there, but I don't use materials. I don't use books in my class with my students. I use their lives. I use the internet. I use like the newspaper and YouTube and all those sort of things, and I just pull that content. That's how I do it. And I've had programs tell me, you know, we'll buy a book and then we'll look at the example, and we're doing workforce, so then I rewrite every example to be very specific to the job that we're training people to do. And I've had other people tell me, you know, I'm an instructor, they give me the curriculum, they give me exactly what I got to teach, and that's what I do. So whichever end of the spectrum you're at, you could take that content and you can use these strategies that we have in the book to kind of help keep it fresh and keep people engaged. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book just so you have a sense of what it is before I show you. We walk through the lesson Up in Arms Over the Second Amendment. So you've already been through the second chapter. That's what we did today. Talk about some of the research on teaching adults, how are adults different than kids. How to select your instructional materials. Again, this doesn't apply to everybody. If you're an instructor and somebody already decides for you what the curriculum is, you could skip that chapter. But I also know we have some curriculum developers who are here or might be reading this, so this is kind of a love letter to you. Just my thoughts on, you know, if we're going to have to redo the curriculum anyway, so if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's involve our students, let's involve our instructors, and get people engaged in the whole process. That's my thing. All right, so, and then there's strategies that use the interdisciplinary approach, so they can use multiple different types of content, and then strategies specifically for language arts, math, science, social studies. And then this last chapter with the digital literacy, I had a little bit in there, and my editor, Terry Lipke, wonderful person at New Readers Press, she's like, people are really, really asking for this. We really need to beef up this chapter. So this is a really, I went through, you know, here's what GED Testing Service says, the skills are you need, and went through every single one of those skills, and they're all covered in terms of a strategy you could use to tackle.
How high level are they going with the math?
Good question. Interestingly, higher and lower. So the whole idea of fewer, clearer, higher means that there's some extraneous stuff with math and with reading that they've kind of cut out. So there's a few things with math, and I'm sorry that I don't have it right in the back of my head, but or on the tip of my tongue, but they have a few things that you're not going to have to worry about. But there are a few things that aren't on the test now that there will be on the test in 2014. For example, the 2AB plus or minus. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Slope of the line.
No, they
No,
do
okay.
slope of the line now.
Linear equations you're talking about?
Linear equations and quadratic equations. Thank you very much. Yeah, linear equations they have now with slope of the line, but they're really going to emphasize it. And they're pushing that all the way to quadratic equations. So not only are they going to have to figure out the slope where it's just a straight line, but also when you have exponents and you got to graph that stuff. So when it comes to the graphing, to the charting, to those kind of manipulating the math, that is going to be a little bit higher there with the quadratic equations. But there's some other stuff when it comes to measurement.
They're not gonna have it, are they?
They're not going to have it. Estimation is not on the test.
Thank goodness.
Estimation will not be on the test. Right. I already have people that refuse to teach estimation. I'm glad they're getting rid of it because I'm sick of having tutor training and people arguing with me over estimation. Okay.
We need the measurement. I mean, these kids need it for jobs.
Right. So they have, right. And so you can think of measurement as the coordinate plane. That's how I teach measurement, is actually using the coordinate plane. So if you're teaching the coordinate plane, you can use that as measurement. And if you want to teach it and it's not on the GED test, who cares? Teach it. I mean, that's just my personal philosophy.
Read a ruler, because they need
Right.
it. I have students come back to me that's got a job and they don't know how to read the ruler. They're working at a place that, he came back in, he says, Miss Connie, they're making fun of me because I don't know how to read the ruler. I said, baby, you went and you passed the math, but how did you know anyway? We go back over the ruler.
Right.
They need that.
Yes.
How about fraction and percentages?
That will still be on there. Yeah. Although, again, I know some people that don't do
applications.
Yeah,
That's real life applications.
it is, yeah. I'm like you, I just have a problem with teaching just the core and then you get out and you're still not career or college ready, especially career ready. You know, and now it looks like we're going to have to just teach more on the core just to get them to pass the GED, but then because of the cost involved.
I'm actually going to challenge that. I'm going to put it backwards because there was one interesting talk I watched, and I wish I could remember the guy's name in Florida. He was one of the people who helped develop the Common Core, and he explained why the Common Core has increased the text difficulty on the different levels. And he said when you look at the research in terms of, and you split up all the different skills that people need for reading, and you teach them, identifying the main idea and vocabulary and phonetics and things, and and you have this little slope that you teach them, and bit by bit it makes an increase in their scores as they increase their level. There's only one skill that is not like that, and that is interpreting difficult texts. It's like a wall. Either you can interpret difficult texts or you can't. And it is what makes or breaks people's ability to pass high-level tests. So with all the other skills that we teach when it comes to reading, math, those sort of things, we'll teach them over time they'll make incremental gains, and over time they'll get to that higher level. But if you don't give them the difficult stuff, and if you don't give it to them frequently, like you do, I don't care what level they're at, I'm still going to show them something that's challenging. They're not going to do it. So, that's kind of my approach, and I'm going to show you now just for the sake of time, and we can keep throwing your questions out there, but if you want to pull out actually that handout that has the nice graphs and charts on it, up in arms over the Second Amendment, that's what we're going to talk about now. Not all the lessons that I have in the book are field tested, but but I did several of them. Every Wednesday, I have my group of students that I meet with, and the type of program we're working that they're from. It's about a mile from my house. My neighborhood in Cleveland is low-income neighborhood, 97% African American. It's the Huff neighborhood. If any of you have heard of the Huff riots from the 60s, that's my neighborhood. It's not like that anymore. We've come a long way, but people still have a lot of challenges. So I go once a week. They do one-on-one tutoring with volunteers, and then I come in and I do a group. session with them. Not all my students wanted to have their picture taken, but these are the ones who did. So this is Shannon and Jerry and Antonio and Tiffany. And it's a multi-level classroom. Jerry actually had gotten herself up to like 7th grade level, and then she had a stroke. She's worked herself back up to the 3rd grade level. We're very proud of her. Antonio wants to be a baseball player. Tiffany wants to be an electrical engineer, because that's where the money is. And Shannon has a whole baseball team's worth full of kids. And she's passed everything but the math. So we're kind of all over the place here. And so the way we did this lesson, what I did for this section was I gave my students, I gave my students a list of possible topics to talk about, real world topics, and one of them was up in arms over the Second Amendment. And so that's the first thing that they chose. And what I did was I started with a theme, right, of the Second Amendment. That's free. So that's our social studies content. I pulled in some content from some civic groups about the Second Amendment. So we analyzed those reading passages. I also pulled in some graphs and charts that they use to make their arguments. And then in the end, they have to write a response in which they have to cite some evidence. And they discuss it first. My students are very oral. So even when I tell them to write something, they talk about it out loud as they're reading. So it's a bunch of different activities and strategies from the book, and the theme, again, like I said, is chosen by the learners. And I start off the session by asking them, why are we learning as a group? Because this type of instruction is very different. It's very different from the one-on-one tutoring that they're doing, first of all. And it's very different than what most of them had in school. So if I'm going to have them take this contentious issue like the Second Amendment, and I should say that all this happened before Sandy Hook or anything like that, before this was a big thing in the news, they chose this topic. Because, again, I'm in the Huff neighborhood and we deal with this stuff every day. But I asked them, if we're going to talk about this controversial issue, how can we make sure we respect each other, make sure we hear everybody? So I asked them, why are we learning as a group? And now I'm going to ask you, why have them learn as a group? Why talk about this together? What about that is different?
Sharing of information.
Sharing
it reinforces their skills. I mean, they're kind of less afraid to be who they are.
Yeah, that reinforces, yeah.
And you're exposed to different ideas and beliefs.
Different ideas, very good.
Life lessons.
Life lessons, so really, yeah, real world applicability, good. Other thoughts?
Different way to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Practice working as a team.
Working as a team, confidence, that teamwork is going to be essential to the workforce development, real world things. Great. So we kind of talk about, I get their buy-in a little bit, right? You want to work as a group. There's good things that come out of it. And then we kind of set the ground rules. So these are the rules that I set with them. One person talks at a time. We do not have to agree. Everyone can share their thoughts and feelings. And I said respond to the topic, not to others' comments. Again, you can add or change. And I asked them, are there rules you want to change, delete, or add? Are there things that you would have or would not have with your students and the folks that come to your program that you think would be different, or?
Do you ever have them just work with a partner first before working with a larger group? Because sometimes it's easier to draw people out if they're just talking to one other person.
Yes.
And I was that kind of student. I had a hard time talking with a large group, but if they do it in, steps or incrementally.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great strategy to use, yes.
I think that this is good. I mean, recently, there's one thing I didn't do, but recently we did something similar to this because of the letter to Birmingham. I'm from Birmingham.
Right.
Letter from the Birmingham jail.
Yes.
So we had our tutors and our learners together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if yours is just learners, right?
Mine is just learners,
so
yes.
We do one-on-one, but we brought the tutors and the learners together to read the letter.
Wow.
And we took, the letter's kind of complicated, so for some people it was their skill level, it wasn't up to their skill level, but I did a PowerPoint and I selected out, things, concepts and quotes that I thought most people could understand and comment on. And so we did that as a group, and they really kind of liked it, and I was kind of surprised by it. This is the first time we've done anything like that. But I think we're going to expand it to a series with more of his writings, where we can still take out chunks that they can read on their own.
Right, yeah, that's very good. Chunking, you know, it can be tough, but you can bring it in a manageable chunk. That's great. And actually the GED Testing Service mentioned letters for Birmingham jail. I'm going to move on actually to this part. Well, maybe that doesn't explain it, but they chose letters from a Birmingham jail as part of what they call the Great Conversation. So the Great Conversation is a phrase that they're using. You know, we always had to teach Constitution and the Bill of Rights and those sort of things, but they're using this phrase to talk about how we built a constitutional country and government, but also how that conversation has continued over time. And I think that's a really interesting, that's something that I really love about what they're trying to do is say, you know, this is a conversation that's still going on, and our students are a part of that conversation, you know, and they can really figure out what some of this means. So yeah, for this one, you can do it, and I have several different strategies in the book. Some of them are where people come to a consensus about an issue. Some of them, they just discuss it. For this one, I had them like choose a side, you know, and kind of talk about it that way, just because of how this issue is talked about currently. And then they had to kind of make a choice and defend that position. The other thing I did, and you mentioned doing this a little bit, pulling out some of the vocabulary and the words, right? So I always start with some kind of either it's a review of a previous lesson that I can't guarantee that people have been to or not, but I try to pull out things that they need to know in order to really get the lesson. So we talked about what is the U.S. Constitution, what is the Bill of Rights, what is an amendment, and we break it down, amendment, and, you know, pulling that phonemics things as low-level learners, I'm sure you do a lot of. You still do all of those things. And like with my students, this took about an hour, but if you're doing lower-level students, you have to break it down further. You're going to just take more time, and you're really going to build up to just reading the words. But that doesn't mean you don't tackle them. So, who wants to read this one? And actually, I'm going to get the...
A well-regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Great, thank you very much. And now that we did that fluency, now I know when I ask a student to read, they're worried so much on their pronunciation they didn't really comprehend anything that they just read. So we're going to do it twice. Who wants to read it again? Second person.
Just because I'm here.
Yeah.
A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Great. Now, what words in here do you think students would want to define? If you ask them, what don't you know? Look at this. Regulated militia. Barefoot. Infringed. Security, maybe. Yeah. Most of it, maybe all of it. Yep, absolutely. Depending on the level of your learners, right? Yeah, regulated, absolutely. We talked a lot about regulated. Even shall, right? Shall what? We don't use that word. Yep. Yeah, so you just break it down word by word until you read it again. And sometimes I would do it where one person would read it, and then you do the words, and then have somebody read it again, right? And then they're like, oh, that's kind of what it means. But what does it really mean, right? That's what we debate. So we're going to read about, and this is what I would say to them. So now we've talked about the Second Amendment. We have different citizens groups who interpret this amendment in two different ways. So we're going to talk about the different ways that they interpret the words you just read. And who do you think, well, I just showed you. You know, you're looking at the sheet. That was a pointless question. But what I would do to them is just have them guess, like, who do you think, have you heard any groups that have talked about this, you know, to try and see. if what they already know about the issue. Who wants to read about the National Rifle Association for us?
The NRA believes the Second Amendment means that most U.S. citizens have the right to personal gun ownership and use.
And tell us
Why? They believe a well-regulated militia means all citizens have the right to defend themselves with guns.
And also, and I think this is on the handout, and also might be enlisted to the military, at least at the time when it was developed. Great. Who wants to read about the Brady campaign?
The Brady campaign believes that the Second Amendment believes that we should enact stronger regulations to protect citizens from gun violence. Why? They believe that a well-regulated militia means just people in regulated categories are authorized to own and use guns.
All right. 2 different groups. All right. And not only do they use words to come to that belief, they use data and numbers. So why do they think differently? What are we looking at here? What is this showing us?
Murder rates.
Murder rates in Washington, D.C. Okay, so this line here, the black line, is Washington, D.C. And then this dotted purple line is the United States, the whole country during that same time period. Good. What does this tell us? What happened?
More murders in Washington, D.C.
There's more murders in D.C.
I don't want to
So
live in Washington, D.C.
My brother lives in Washington, D.C. I was like, nah. And he's like, really? Where you live? Come on. All right. So it shows 2 events that happened. One was locally, D.C. created a handgun ban and trigger lock law in about 1975. And then in 2007, this law was struck down. And actually that happened on a national level with the Supreme Court decision. But what happened in that time period between when it went into effect and when it was struck down? More murders. So the NRA looks at that, these and similar charts in other cities, as evidence that handgun bans and local laws actually increase murder rates. It's an argument they use. All right. The Brady campaign looks at other data and makes different arguments. So what are some of these? These are a lot of numbers. But what's going on here? Firearm facts. What are some of the things? I'm going to pull out just a couple of them to read to you because I know it's small. Non-fatal gun injuries and assault are up since 2008 to 55,000, over 55,000 a year. And suicides have gone up. In 2010, they were the highest since 1998 at 19,000. That's one of those. So the Brady campaign says there's too many victims of this stuff. How can we not do something? Other things that you pull out or other things you mean?
The gun ownership one is crazy. 88 per 100 people.
88%. And again, you're getting to your percents, right? 88% of people in 2007.
Well, we NRA people, though.
Huh?
We NRA people are going to look at that differently.
Okay, how would the NRA people look at that differently?
That says gun murders have gone down.
Right, so the NRA...
Gun aggravated assault has gone down. Gun robbery has gone down.
Okay, so you would say actual death versus injury has gone down. Except suicides.
Might have anything to do with it.
It might not.
I can't see this. What's that one in that corner? The second one to your right.
This one?
The one that went down in the middle.
This one, gun robbery, has gone down. In 2011, it was at the lowest rate since 2004. It had gone down to 122,000 in 2011. So, yeah, so the NRA would look at that and say, actually, with gun ownership going up, robbery has gone down. These are all things that you can, and here's something somebody else, and again, I'm not, you have to be very careful in things like this, not to say this is what my personal opinion is, but to talk from the perspective of the group you're talking about. So what, so the NRA, like you're saying, would say ownership went up, gun robbery went down. Now, what somebody told me in one of these sessions, they looked at this chart and said, well, the Brady campaign would say, well, murder went down on their own without the law. So in both cases, you can kind of get people really thinking critically about the data that we're seeing, because we're dealing with reality. You know, our numbers aren't as clean, maybe, as our solutions might be. All right, so, and I usually would really delve into these and talk about them, what does it mean, and you did a great job of going into like, well, you know, that's what they're using, but I wouldn't use that, you know, and I don't think that's a convincing argument. And they go into it, and I let them talk about, you know, which side that they choose, and I'm not going to do that today, just because I want you to be able to have a chance to develop your own lesson plan. But then we talk about the Second Amendment again. We have somebody else read it out loud. And then we get into the what do you think? What does the well-regulated militia mean? I make them make a choice and pick out what is the evidence that supports your choice. And this is where they would say, well, this, you know, this supports my side, this supports your side, yada yada. And they start pulling in all sorts of stuff. I had one student who said, it's like, I've been shot. So let me tell you, right. Let me tell you what that's like. And he was really interesting, and this is one of the reasons I really, I love this lesson, because he said, you know, I can't choose, because they both have good points, right? He was saying in some situations, you know, there are groups that have guns that I don't want to have guns. He was like, the police are the biggest gang I know. You know, they're a regulated group, but then they have guns. So, you know, people need their own weapons to defend themselves. But there are people out there who are just nuts, and who are just going to go off, and they shouldn't be able to go out and get a gun, and a lot of them go out and get a gun. So he was really interesting. I have another student who said, she was like, when I'm going to start my own country, and we're just not going to have the Second Amendment, and we don't have to worry about this argument. So people find really interesting ways to talk about it. But what I found was really interesting was people were able to take these really emotional situations that they had been in and not be in the moment about it, and to step back and say, this is a bigger picture that's going on, and really engage with the conversation, which I think is really, really empowering. So after that, yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I understand why you would go through this type of lesson plan for a Common Core state standard.
Right.
But how do questions on the GED get asked from this type of thing?
Yeah, how does this relate? Good, very good question. So it relates in a couple ways. One is that the Second Amendment very well be on the test. That's one of the, anything in the Bill of Rights and anything in the Constitution, anything in the letters from a Birmingham jail, and those things in the Great Conversation may be on the test. They might be used as, you know, multiple choice questions. They might be used as your extended response. It's also preparing students for that extended response, where they really, and especially this second part, where they have to make an argument. And whatever argument they make, they're not being judged on what position they take. They're being based on how well can they take the evidence that has been presented to them and make an argument based on it, regardless of what other things they bring in. So in that kind of situation, they might bring in some of the personal evidence, and that's what they're going to go to, is just bringing in their personal evidence and their personal opinion. And they really have to bring it back to what's presented. What does the numbers actually say? Yeah.
Okay, so on the computerized GED test, they're going to make a extended response?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the way it's going to be set up, just to like visualize it a little bit for you, is like, let's say, you know how a browser looks with the tabs up, right? So they're going to have, say, they have 4 tabs, right? And then it's going to be a split screen. So on the one side of the screen, they're going to have the actual question and the space for students to write in. And then on the left side, with the tabs, is going to be your text, because it might be longer than just one section. So if it's longer than one section, they read through a section of it. So let's say, like we just did, they had 4 tabs. They had the Brady campaign text, the Brady campaign graph, the NRA text, the NRA graph, you know, compare and contrast the different positions here. You know, I'm just throwing out there a possible question that would look like this. The other thing that they'll have is a little whiteboard instead of just paper, scratch paper. They're going to have a whiteboard to write on, but they are going to have like scratch paper kind of, or erasable note taker, I think is what they're calling it, to be able to write and still sketch out their ideas before they type it up. It has all of the GED assessment targets. So it lists what are all the topics in science, what are all the topics in social studies, what are all the topics in math, and they have a comparison chart. So you can see on one side how it looks on 2002 and how it looks on 2014. So you've seen that?
And the crosswalk.
Yeah. The other thing you're going to want to look for is sample assessment items for the 2014. And that's where I'm pulling that description of how it's going to look, is from those sample items. So you can actually see how it's going to look to the students. Now on those items, they really emphasize the kind of unique questions like the extended response or the more challenging kind of text that might be on it. So it will look harder in those assessment items than it's really going to ultimately be. But those are incredibly useful. And the other thing that they're just adding now is tutorials. The tutorials that students look at when they go on the test. That's one of those major changes they made when they went to computer-based testing. They group the kind of questions together that they're going to have, and then they have a little video to explain to students how to actually answer that type of question. Because they're not just going to have multiple choice anymore. They might have a drag and drop, where they give you a graphic organizer, and you have to, instead of having like A, B, C, D, you take the item and then you drag it and you drop it into the correct place in the graphic organizer. Or you have a graph and chart, right? And you have a dot, you know, a bar graph or a dot graph, and then you have a table over here, and they say, well, complete the dot graph with the information from the table. So you drag a dot over to 2, and then you drag a dot over to 4 to make it the right level. Those are the types of different questions. Yeah.
I think once they do the webinar, they have more of a vision what's on there.
Yes.
We're fortunate that we have already done one training, and there were like 20 questions afterwards. The first one, and we're scheduled for another one next week. And you'll get a better visual of what to expect from the new test.
How do you get a webinar? Do you have to sign up?
Yeah, you go to the GED Testing Service website. When you go there, GEDtestingservice.com, it'll say test takers on one side and then educators, administrators on the other side. You click on administrators, and then it'll say 2014 assessment. You click on that, and all that stuff is there. So they have the schedule for webinars. They have these, you know, how to use. They have demos of the online calculator that they're going to use. All those sort of things are on there.
You know, I will say for the 2002 test, we were provided with, the Bill of Rights and certain documents that students should be familiar with to integrate and prepare them for the new 2002 test. So I imagine they're going to provide some of the same type of information. The closer we get to the test, they also changed with more forms and documents on the 2002 test when it became the new test. So I'm thinking it would be the same type of sample material. We don't know when they're going to send it, but that we hopefully we'll get it, because we got it with the 2002 test when we transitioned into that. So we had an idea of where to lead our students to for the material to prepare them for the new questions that were going to be on the test.
You know what? And if we have time, honestly, I mean, I have the after I give you a chance to go through and look at some of this interdisciplinary lesson plan, I have the Wi-Fi here, and we can actually look through some of those test items if you'd like.
Oh yeah,
okay. Yeah, we'll do that. We've already started with questions, but other questions about the GED? Yeah.
Is your book available yet?
It's available for order. There was a pre-order sale till the end of April, which we hoped meant that the book would be out in May, but it's not quite out yet. So that's newreaderspress.com. So either your local New Readers Press sales rep. A lot of people like to go through that, or if you want to just go online, it's newreaderspress.com.
But right now, though, are they the only ones that are putting up and jumping in front with this new GED testing material?
I mean, they're the only ones who have something out there yet. And it's hard. I mean, it was a hard choice for them to make because, you know, this is a moving target, really. You know, every week they're coming out with new information about what it's going to be like, but they said, you know, that they're part of ProLiteracy, you know, and everybody's saying they need something. They need something. So they said, we started on this process last fall, you know, so, but there are a lot of other providers who are in the process of writing things, but some of them are waiting till they have more information.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are they still going to use TABE as the pre-assessment and the GED testing sites, or is that going to change into?
That's a very good question because TABE is with the task. But I think TABE is, I should say, TABE is still going to be around. So, and it's not, TABE was never, just like between the way task and GED is going to be, it was never directly correlated. Like they created their own, you know, this is your level at which you had to pass, but it was, right, it is, you know, and again, that's going to be on a state-by-state basis. Like again, in Ohio, you can use the TABE, or you can use the RAT, or you can use the BEST test for ESOL. So there's a couple different ones. Some people use, I'm blanking on the one out of P. Gain. Yeah. Right, there's Gain from Wonderlic, and there's the workplace one, there's CASAS, right. It's state by state. Great. All right, so now is your turn to really dive into it. And I have another handout for you. All right, friends, we're going to all come back to the trail together. Continue on our journey of this presentation. I'm going to give each group a chance to report back either on your lesson plan or whatever it is that you discussed.
We're the rogues over here.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, this is your workshop. I want you to get out of it what you're here to get out of it. But I want to give each group at least a couple minutes. You know, don't go on for, you know, I'll stop you after 2 or 3 minutes. But but if you could each choose one person to come up and present what you talked about. Who wants to go first? All right. Yay!
Okay, we just kind of cheated and copied hers to some extent.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fair. Cheating's fair. Okay, education.
Right.
All right, so we did definition of citizenship. And that's based on the 14th Amendment, where anyone that is born in this country is automatically a citizen regardless of whether their mother and father were born in this country. And so we would bring in the Amendment 14, and that also talks about due process, which we would not be talking about, but which might come up anyway. And some of the things that we would go over for vocabulary again were amendment, constitution, citizenship, a citizen, naturalization, because 14th Amendment mentions naturalization, the process of making an amendment, the census, the fact that there's no dual citizenship recognized in the United States, and the term jurisdiction. So our themes to interpret would be the 14th Amendment, and we were going to possibly, since this is a low-level class, we were going to use the New Reader's Press Citizenship book to help with that. I'm not familiar with that document, but and then we could also do some research on the computer on the U.S. Census website, which is just full of all sorts of good information. And the activity that we're going to have them do is to present pros and cons of being a citizen and to come up with a sequence of events that you would go through to become a naturalized citizen. And we'd have them write their thoughts and we would have them do that on some type of word processing system. And right now, a lot of my classes do not have computers, but I guess we're headed that way, so we might as well get started.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Who wants to go next?
I was the secretary. Does that mean I go?
Yeah. And then we'll be.
We volunteered. Well, we chose what I thought would be particularly difficult, work this around a math lesson. And I was wrong. They did a great job. We worked it around a math lesson, and we were talking about the order of operations and how to teach the order of operations. I'm going to come back to the expectations last. We'll be talking about PEMDAS, and one of our teachers mentioned she's constantly reintroducing her students to Aunt Sally and letting them know the very helpful acronym. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS, which stands for the order that you go in if you have more than one operation in a math problem. Doing the parentheses first, making sure that the students are aware just exactly what parentheses are, not just in the English language, but also in the math language. And brackets and braces as well. That was news to my students the last time I talked about this subject. They didn't know that you don't put a parentheses next to a parentheses and how confusing that could be. So we've talked about that, talked about exponents and square roots, working on that skill, and then working our way to having multiple steps in a problem. Of course, doing the multiplication and division before you do the addition and subtraction, unless the addition and subtraction is in parentheses. We also talked about teaching the commutative property, just reminding students that when you add 2 and 3, you'll get the very same answer if you add 3 and 2. And of course, if you're multiplying 2 times 3, you'll get the same answer as if you're multiplying 3 times 2. But when you start sticking all of these operations in one problem, there's a certain order you have to follow. So the text we wanted to use was sample questions from the GED that use this skill, and so teach from those sample questions. But our goal was to work towards having the students create their own problems at their own table that they can solve. Sometimes you come up with some problems that involve numbers that you just really can't work out. I encourage my students to use numbers under 10, but they'll create a problem, they'll solve a problem, and then each student volunteers first, will come forward and put their problem on the board and allow the class to solve the problem that they have created and that they already know can be solved. We were asked, wondering, what do you do with shy students who don't want to do that? Well, you don't call on them first. And I tell my students that being the teacher is actually the easiest job in the classroom, because you can say, well, what do I do next? Tell me what to do, and let the students give you the answers. And so giving each student an opportunity to put their problem on the board. They love acting like the teacher, and usually they're really sweet teachers, and sometimes they're really mean teachers, but it's fun to see what they do with that. And so our expectations, going back to the top, is not only that they'll be able to solve problems using the order of operations, but have the confidence and the courage to step in front of their peers, and they get a lot of encouragement. It can be a very a boosting and empowering experience. So that's part of what we'd like to see. And then finally, we ended up with technology for student use. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 different math sites where you can generate problems, and they can go to the internet, and you can provide them with problems. They can get problem practice, and some of these were new to me. TheGreatMartiniCompany.com, Math.com, CUDASoftware.com, MathTeacher.com. There you go.
Thank
What's
you.
the first website?
TheGreatMartiniCompany.com.
Great.
TheGreatMartiniCompany.com, Math.com, CUDA, K-U-T-A Software.com.
That's great for worksheets.
And MathTeacher.com.
Great.
You're welcome.
And I'll be putting these on my website.
Well, we kind of followed your example with the social studies activity. It would have been easier than the math. Our focusing thing, the 3 branches of the United States government. Now, we're working with low level, and it depends on how easily they accept this with some of the things that we want to have them do. And it certainly is going to be like what we used to do is unit plans or 6 weeks plans. It may last longer than a week to do these with them. Set expectations. students would understand the different branches and their functions. Vocabulary content preview or review, executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Now they need to gain an understanding of the powers of each and the governing bodies that come under the each, like Congress, Supreme Court, Presidential Department, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Text on the thing to interpret, the definition of powers of each, and all of that they could get from going online if we had computers in the classroom. And if you have other materials, call them. Email our representatives and senators and get them to send us these things. Data on the thing to interpret, they would create charts and graphs from the information that they were finding in their research. Directions for student activity. We decided it would be fun if they created a Jeopardy game. And on the government, on the terms, maybe the names, like who's our current president, who's in charge of them, who do we send our income tax to, that kind of thing. Writing a graphic organizer. If they couldn't do it as a group on one of these, if one is interested in one activity and one another activity, they could do kind of a group presentation. One, if you knew how to create a PowerPoint, could do a PowerPoint of these charts and graphs that they have created, or a chart, or if you wanted to make somebody could make an oral presentation about who their senators to the U.S. Senate is, something like that. Formative assessment, the individual would write a summary of what they have learned. Not trying to go into a whole lot of detail, but they're low level, so they wouldn't anyway, but just the basics. And the technology used would be the computer and notepads. Now see, this would be something you'd build on, and it would be more than a week, I think, to do. And you'd have to have a group. A group, you couldn't be one-on-one, you'd have to have a group.
Great. Thank you. All right. You want to report on?
Well, we kind of got back around to the task. I didn't write anything, so I was a bad secretary. But
I won't have anything to post on.
Yeah, sorry. So y'all take notes. So we kind of were talking about our issues in our programs and things that applied to us or affected us. And one of the things that we talked about was financial literacy, and how this could apply to that in a very nice way. That you know, you could integrate terminology like predatory lending, interest rates, and all this different kind of stuff. You could easily find a text on the theme about, you know, anything really, budgeting, predatory lending, interest rates, anything like that. You could also have data like graphs to interpret different information like that. They could use things online. There are all sorts of tools online to figure out your monthly payments and your interest rates and all this, that they could be manipulating something in technology, and so, but at the same time integrating math and reading. So we sort of got there.
Great. Thank you. Yay.
And for the Tennessee AE people, the state of Tennessee has introduced a new financial literacy curriculum for elementary that is introduced at grade 1, 3, 5, and 8. And I went to a workshop on it for my school system, and apparently they're part of the pilot program. But it's a 6-week program. The books are purchased by the local public schools, but if you have a good relationship with them, or you can purchase them yourself, and they're not very expensive. But I looked at every one of them, and even the first grade book is appropriate for adults because the pictures aren't real babyish. But they talk about the difference in want and need, and how things happen. When you put your debit card in the machine, what happens? And there's a flow chart that shows, okay, talks to the bank, and the bank through the internet says, yes, there's money. No, there's not money. If you use it's just wonderful.
What's the name of it again?
It's financial literacy. That's a program I don't know the exact name of the book, but it's a pilot program that the state is adopting to introduce into the curriculum next year in all public schools.
Wow.
What state?
Very cool.
Tennessee.
Great.
My presenter was from University of Memphis, but it's a great program. Great program.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. These
Is
are
there
lots
a
of.
way, who will we talk to about networking among ourselves with emails and such?
I mean,
Somebody, I guess.
who wants to volunteer? I mean, I certainly have my things that I use, but you know, it's.
But I'm
more-
talking about like.
ProLiteracy used to do one.
They still
have a
have their
listserv.
email listserv.
But there's not
So-
like like you used to be able to
Subgroup.
write in a problem you were having, and then everybody could email back. And I forget
Right.
what term it
You
was.
still do it.
You have to go to another, where is it? Another location. Where is it though? It's not like how it used to be.
Yeah, it's
Isn't it the
different, 'cause
Knox
that's what
School
gets-
people, the Center for Literacy Studies? Or no, they changed their name, didn't they?
Something. They moved it from our email. We don't get the way
They
we
changed
used
their
to
name.
get it.
Yeah. I don't know. I
They
mean,
changed it to one of- something that
I
means
think that
get a
would be
job.
something we can ask
Like
Robin
work, career, something.
downstairs. Is exactly how that works with ProLiteracy. And I haven't heard their email list are not working, but it hasn't been as active. Definitely. But if you all want to get together and, I mean, if somebody has a notepad and you want to share your emails with each other, and somebody send out an email, it'd be
I'll
fun.
pass this around if y'all want.
We were wondering in our group how that extended question, the answer would be graded.
Ah, that's an excellent question. So what they're doing right now, they have rubrics, like they do now, right? And they're slightly different between reading, the reasoning through language arts and the social studies. So the reasoning through language arts has a much heavier emphasis on your edited American English and doing your grammar and your spelling and those sort of things. But they all really focus on how well do you make your argument and how well do you support your argument. That's the primary thing they're looking at.
So does a person grade those?
So what they're doing, yes and no. So what they're doing is with the field testing, and I realize I can't see everybody in the middle, but they're having human experts, scoring experts, score all the field testing. And then the human experts are training a computer to be the automated scoring guide. So for every single one of those questions, they have human beings who have scored all the field tests, and then the computer, that's how they can get you the responses within 3 hours or instantaneously even, is because it's actually a computer doing the scoring guide. But it's computers scoring it as humans have told them to score it. So if you've ever seen Watson on Jeopardy or whatever, I mean, they're using that guy.
They're looking for words and phrases.
They're using. I mean, they're really using the. They're looking at a lot. I mean, it's very, very complex. It's not just they're pulling out keywords. I mean, these are computers thinking like people. I mean,
it's more than one.
Yeah, it's It is like science fiction, except it's not fiction. It is real. I mean, 3 years ago, we were like, oh, Star Trek, they had those things you could hold in your hand and you could just tap the screen or whatever. Now tablets are boring, they're everywhere. I mean, it's for real. It's here. And they're taking our jobs, quite honestly. But that's why I love these strategy things. There are things about being a teacher you can't automate.
So is the computer, are they checking grammar and like punctuation
Yep.
and all that too?
Yep. But how heavily they grade it depends on the rubric. It's going to be graded much more heavily on your reasoning through language arts. Science and social studies, not so heavily. It's not going to have that big of an impact on the final score. Yeah. But yeah, they can pick up all those little things. And the big things. So you wanted to look at these. We can actually look at it. Okay, so this is the GED Testing Service website. Okay, so we go over here to educators. Oh, come on. And it was going just fine for me before, and then now that everybody's looking, it's going to take forever. That's just the way it works. So while it's going, I'm going to tell you a funny story. that I tell when I do my technology sessions. My dad worked for IBM for 30 years, and his dad worked for IBM for 40 years. My grandfather literally built the computers, like the mainframes that were as big as this room, and his job was, when things were broken, he would go out with his toolbox and he would go fix the computer, right? And so when I was in high school, and they finally they had retired down to Florida, and I went with my dad to install their first PC in their house. And he was going nuts. I mean, he's taking this CPU and he's turning it around. He's like, how do I get the screwdriver in there? If it's wrong, how do I fix this thing? He couldn't, so there's always something that goes wrong with the computers, and it's like, it just cracks me up, because every time I just think of my grandfather, how do I get my screwdriver in there? Doesn't matter how well you know it, you've got to unlearn everything. All right, so for educators, 2014 test. Okay, here's that. I talked about the assessment guide. So here's a bunch of neat things that I want you to go do. If you have your mobile device, you can even do this now if you want. I won't be offended. So there's a few things I want you to do. One, sign up for assessment alerts. Okay, that means every time they have a webinar, every time they publish a new guide or something like that, it'll come right to your email. There's also this teacher's guide. Okay, you can watch all the webinars. Did you see that there? There was a watch. Any of the webinars they've recorded. So this is an 8-week course to help you walk through the teacher's guide that they've created to the 2014 test. We got through it in 3 hours. I think that's pretty cool. And then there's the assessment guide. That's if you really want to look at the assessment targets in more detail, and you really want that detailed list of exactly what topics are on the test or not on the test. That's the assessment guide is what you'll download, and the actual targets themselves are chapter 2, so you can download it. Beep beep beep. And when you download it, it's going to ask you to give your name and sign you up for the assessment alerts, which you can opt out of. But all right, so these are the actual samplers themselves, and you can download these to your computer to use on your own time and go through, or you can do them online. So this is the online version, but it looks just the same. Okay, so you know how I mentioned there was these tags, right? They have the answer explanation, which I don't think they're going to have on the real test. That would be nice, huh? But I think that's what they'll have like on the practice tests and things like that. So on this one, you can't, whoops, there we go. You could tab through, so page 1. And even on page 1, they're scrolling, but then you still have to hit the tab for page 2. Just like on the internet, huh? All right, page 3, page 4, page 5, and then which quotation from the passage supports this idea, yada, yada, yada. You pick your thing, you just click on it, and then you hit next, and then you can, and so this is that split screen idea that I was talking about. So, yep, there's a math one. Here, let me get to, just on the reading language arts, let me get to the extended response, just so you can see that. You can see how these are multiple choice. This is what I was talking about drag and drop with the order of events. So, and then you have to scroll down. I love Anna Green Gables.
Now, I had understood that after they take the test, if they fail it, they actually get a prescription, so to speak, of what they missed. Is that true?
Maybe.
Moving target.
Somebody saying this. Moving target, I don't know. Everything I know I'll share with you, but I don't know that one.
If they came away with
It's very
that,
possible.
With their week on.
That's entirely possible. I don't know. And then and then these ones are within the passage, okay? These are drop-down menus. So you click your little arrow and you select. The speed and power of our Skyview processes have been outstanding. Your products are always well suited to our needs. You select your answer, and then when you click on it, it shows it right there.
That's a lot better than the other. I mean, that right
Yes.
there, I mean, they're not having to pull it from the bottom and place it
Exactly.
in, you know, visually doing it themselves, so that's.
Right, you can see the usability is really there. All right, so then again, President Truman, and again, it's like the multi-page article.
These are fairly long articles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're up to 950 words for each. But they have multiple questions on one thing for the most part. And then here we go. This is your extended response. So you can see similarly you page through, and then you have your thing. So they can do cut, copy, and paste, and they can also use the shortcuts, control copy, control paste, just like they would in a normal word processor. And I think they can even drag and drop. I don't know, I can't select it on this one, but.
The cut, copy, and paste is not from the document itself. It's only from
It's
the text
within.
that they typed.
Oh, good to know. Okay, so if they want to quote, they still have to type the quote. Good to know. Prevents them from just copying, cutting the whole thing.
Yes.
But still, anyway. All right, so then they tell you what's answered, what's unanswered. Most of them I did not answer. And then you can review them, and you can do flag for review. All right, you wanted to do math next? Okay, so what's on it? There's the calculator.
I can't see that. Would you read the problem, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize how light it is. A painter rented a wallpaper steamer at 9 a.m. and returned it at 4 p.m. He paid a total of $28.84. What was the rental cost per hour?
So the math questions are really a whole lot different from the way it is right now.
No, I mean, it's really just, when it comes to the, yes, they're still all word problems, still mostly multiple choice. There'll still be a few questions where you have to, like we said, just like with reading, drag and drop, click things on a graph. They're called hotspots. But in terms,
You've got 4 choices, not 5.
that's right. You could no longer have none of these, or whatever it is, or the same thing, like they used to have in reading, like stays the
Not
same.
enough,
You don't have that anymore. It's only 4. So, so there's the calculator, and then the formula sheet is different. You don't have formulas for perimeter. I really don't, I'll be honest, I'm not the hugest fan of some of these things, just because, like, it says perimeter of the base B, but it doesn't tell you what base B is, you know. So, I don't know. It, like, they just don't define things like they did on the other one. But it is what it is. So before they had tons of area questions, and these are a lot more surface area and volume. So they're really focusing on the 3-dimensional objects, and they kind of assume that you know the 2-dimensional objects. So again, it's that higher. And then they have slope of the line. They still have the slope, the intercept, quadratic equation, quadratic formula, Pythagorean theorem, and simple interest. So those things are the same. Yeah, and then did you see the calculator? It's the TI 330XS. And if you go, again, back to the GED Testing Service website, they have, oh, this is, people were asking what do they have. Sorry, I'm going all over the place, and that's That's part of the danger of the internet, huh? This is the list of publisher products. So as things are released, they're listing up there what they have and what they're developing. Most of these things, and you can see the dates. Most of them are not going to be out until the fall, sometime in the fall. Some of them not until actually 2014 itself. So.
Do you think this test is going to be postponed?
I don't think.
What about students with special needs who can't accommodations?
Yes.
The accommodations.
Yes, they will still have accommodations. They are doing, instead of state by state doing accommodations, GED Testing Service is doing all accommodations themselves. So because it was very inconsistent, and it's still going to be on a case by case basis, but all of the forms are there. On the GED Testing Service website, and they've added accommodations for intellectual disability in 2014. I have no idea. And that's why I'm not a intellectual disability. So people who have an IQ under 75, they will have accommodations. I don't know what those accommodations are going to look like. Might be 3 triple time or something. I have no idea.
Vision impaired.
Vision impaired is all there. Yep, that's under physical. I mean, just like before, you have to have your diagnostician. They fill out the paperwork, but instead of applying to the state, you're going to apply to GED Testing Service so that it's a little more consistent. Good question, though, because a lot of our folks have some kind of disability. Absolutely. Great. So do you want to look at science or social studies? Or are we good? Huh? Science? All right, let's look at science. Maps continents and the outlines of the plates. I just saw this at the Natural History Museum the other day. They had a really cute little light up thing that looked just like that. All right, and then they have to scroll and then click. There we go. Okay. So can you read that? Which conclusion can be reached from the information on the map? Volcanoes are scattered randomly across Earth. Volcanoes are only located along edges of continents. Yada, yada, yada. And then they have this little flag for review thing. So if they want to just say, I'll come back to it later, they can do that. This is the energy pyramid. Tertiary consumers, secondary consumers, primary consumers, and producers. Which statement correctly describes the flow of energy through this pyramid? All of the energy from the lower levels is available to the top level. The producer level directly provides energy for all of the other levels. The highest amount of energy is transferred between levels that contain consumers. Energy is directly transferred from the primary consumers to the secondary consumers. Food webs. Right. A scientist collects data on the solubility of different salts at different temperatures. The results are shown in the graph. So again, it's mostly multiple choice. And you have PB, blah, 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 KCl. So they still have to know, I mean, the content on the science is really, when you look at the comparison charts, it's very similar. It's probably, science and social studies content probably changed the least. They did not go, I don't think they went fewer, clearer, higher when it comes to science and social studies, honestly. But that's not part of the Common Core, so. And there we go, we have a chart. A temperature change occurs when ammonium chloride is dissolved in a water solution. The table shows the temperature change over a period of 120 seconds. So here's your math, and there's a equation down there about Fahrenheit, degrees Fahrenheit to degrees Celsius. And you may use the calculator. So you're actually doing math on the science test and using the calculator. So I'm going to see if they have, and then here's a sample of your short answer, where you have a text. It's going to be shorter text, only 2 pages this time. Deforestation or clearing away trees is occurring in tropical rainforests. So again, explain how deforestation could disrupt the life cycle, and that's information, that's a little more recall or summarization. It's really like level 2 stuff. You know, it's not as much creating an argument. So, and then the GED Social Studies is pretty similar to what we've seen. I think we've talked about that a lot, and it's still loading, so never mind.
The tests are the same times, right? They have the same amount of time, or the written part on each of the science and the social studies, are they separate?
Good question. So on the science, since it's short answer, it's not a separate time. So they just put it in there with everything else, but they say that you should budget about 10 minutes. With the extended response in science, in social studies, and in language arts, it will be a separate time. So they'll do all your multiple choice and then stop the clock and then do your 25 minutes or your 45 minutes. Great question. And that was, again, something we just found out this week. Moving target. So good. These are great. Any other questions from the website or anything like that?
Well, all right, I got on mine and got to where you were, but then
Yes.
where's the sample questions?
Where's the item samplers? You might not be able to see them on your phone.
Because I got to GED Ready, the official practice test, but I can't get.
Okay.
I might have to
Go
do
to 2014 test.
I'll try my iPad.
And then it's, yeah, look up here.
Okay.
For now, you're going to click 2014 test, see where I'm clicking, and then see the item samplers.
All right. So just go there. That's
You
fine.
go there, and then you have to download them, but to download them, you have to, it's view, print, blah, 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 get it now, and then when you do that, you have to give them your name,
Okay.
and then download it.
I think I got that far, and then I was thinking I was in the wrong place. You'd already
No.
done all that, okay?
I already did that while you were in your groups.
Okay.
So, you know, it takes a little bit to download it and get it. So they have a couple, they have the interactive online version, and then they have PDF. A PDF you can have to kind of just look at it offline. Great. So a lot of great resources there. I think, let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so I said this at the beginning, but I just wanted to reiterate, it's available on my website, and you have permission to use this as Train the Trainer, so please take it home. And also, if you give me your lesson plans, I'll scan this and post it on my website, and if you want any any other sample blank lesson plans, I'm just going to leave them out on the table. You can take them with you. Thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful session, and to answer your question that you had before, the book is available at newreaderspress.com or with your state sales rep. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Great session.
Thank you.